This is the story that fires me up tonight. President Obama and the Senate Democrats need to take a stand for the middle class and stop capitulating to the Tea Party on this budget fight. Politico reports a crowd of roughly 200 Tea Party faithful showed up on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. today. The small crowd was there to push Republicans to pass $60 billion in cuts to the federal government. Now, a handful of Republican lawmakers showed up to their fire up the crazies.
Cut the budget. Get this government under control. It's not good enough to slow it down. We've got to reduce the size of this government.
We've got to say to Harry Reid and liberals in the Senate, this far and no farther. We got to borrow a line from another Harry and say the debt stops here.
I believe we can surmount any problem. We can climb any hill. I believe, as Ronald Reagan said, that government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem.
Makes you regurgitate, doesn't it? Tea Party chair and 2012 presidential hopeful Michelle Bachmann got the crowd all jacked up with this load of garbage.
They want to shut the government down, and they want to turn you into their scapegoat and say it's the Tea Party's fault for shutting the government down. Now the cat is out of the bag. We know who has no interest in negotiating. It's Harry Reid. It's the big libs over in the Senate.
Nah, $33 billion in cuts, that's not negotiating. Democrats aren't the ones saying shut it down. It is the Republicans.
If liberals in the Senate would rather play political games and shut down the government instead of making a small down payment on fiscal discipline and reform, I say shut it down.
I guess he's not sharing notes with Michelle Bachmann. He says shut it down. Now, look, this is a time, I think, for Democrats to wake up. Republicans are handing you the gun. The Tea Party wants to force John Boehner to shut it down, and Democrats don't have the guts to let it happen. Last night, Vice President Joe Biden and the Democrats put $33 billion worth of cuts on the table. Speaker Boehner hasn't agreed to anything yet. The Speaker knows he can't look weak to the Tea Party members in his caucus.
Our goal is to cut spending, not shut down the government. And you've heard a lot of talk over the last 24 hours. There's no agreement on numbers, and nothing will be agreed to until everything is agreed to. We control one-third of the government here, but we're going to continue to fight for the largest spending cuts that we can get to keep the government open and funded through the balance of this fiscal year.
Speaker Boehner is absolutely correct. The Democrats have the Senate and the White House. So why in the hell are they giving in to any of these cuts at all? The American economy, can we agree, it's pretty much still on the ropes. It's a fragile recovery. Unemployment still high, and millions of Americans rely on government assistance just to survive. This is exactly the wrong time to cut anything. Take a good look at this chart. During the last 12 months of the Bush administration, unemployment skyrocketed. Those numbers did a 180 when President Obama and the Democrats passed the largest stimulus package in the history of the country and gave a loan to the automobile industry, which the Republicans have decried all along. America has had 12 straight months of private sector job creation because the federal government invested money in people and projects. Now, if the Republicans get their way, it will wipe out that momentum and cost America 700,000 jobs. That's not my number. That's Moody's number. Democrats have let Republicans convince America that the federal government needs to tighten its belt. Okay, a little bit. I get it. But $33 billion? Why? Why that number? President Obama and the Democrats gave in on extending the Bush tax cuts, gave in on the public option, which would have saved money, and gave in on the Employee Free Choice Act, where there really was no fight for American workers. And I'm just saying, you know, when does the weakness stop? I mean, do the Democrats have any guts at all to draw a line in the sand every time a party of Tea Party folks show up at the Capitol? There's 200 or 300 of them. Oh, we got to make more cuts. So we went to the Senate Democrats today. The producers of this show, The Ed Show, put the request out to every single Democratic press aide in the Senate. We did this today. We said, we'd like to know whether there are any Senate Democrats willing to come on the program tonight to defend the proposed $33 billion in budget cuts. If your boss is willing to do so, please let us know. That's an email we sent to the press secretaries of all the Democratic senators. You know how many showed up? Not a single Democrat accepted the offer. Not one. Why? Because they don't want to go out and say to their constituents, well, we got to cut $33 billion. This is a tough thing to do. It's a tough pill to swallow. And the last time I saw the ratings on the Tea Partiers in this country, they're going down in the polls. We're seeing a shift. Cutting anything right now is exactly the wrong thing to do. And the Democrats are letting the Tea Party call the shots, in my opinion. Take a good look at today's Tea Party rally. President Obama, Senate Democrats, and John Boehner, they are letting this small group of radical people set a policy for America. A handful of Fox News-loving Americans have got more power than what? Than 100,000 people who were fighting for their rights in Madison, Wisconsin? The president, of course, arguably never went to bat for these middle-class folks because it would have been about him. It would have politicized the whole thing. And I said in previous commentaries, I'm sick of that garbage. It is about politics. And right now, they're out politicking us. That's how I feel as a liberal. Look, the Senate Democrats have to realize one thing. You can't pin this on President Obama. You guys got elected, too. You have the majority. The Senate Democrats need to stand up and say, you know what? You gave us a record number of filibusters. You've said no to absolutely everything. We gave you the Bush tax cuts. We're not going to take these draconian cuts. Shut down the government. Go ahead and do whatever you guys got to do. We're ready to do this. But for some reason, the Senate Democrats, they get in caucus and they say, well, you know, President Obama's got to engage. President Obama really has to do that. What, does President Obama have to lift every weight in Washington? Hold your own, Harry. Get your caucus together and say, we're not going to do $33 billion worth of cuts. Because you're going to have to go home and explain cuts that are going to really hurt a lot of Americans who helped put President Obama and the Democrats in power in the Senate. I don't think Americans want these kind of cuts. There's a huge difference between $10 billion and $33 billion. There's going to be a political backlash to this. And right now, here you have Boehner in a tight spot because he's answering to the radicals. Make him answer to the radicals. It's his problem. It's not our problem. And don't turn and say, well, we got to hear more from the White House. No, you don't. You have the majority, Democrats. You have the votes to sit there and say across the board, we're not going to do this. We are not going to hurt Americans. You know why? Because Republicans, we gave you everything you wanted during the lame duck. We gave you the coveted Bush tax cuts that were going to save the economy. So the job creation, Mr. Boehner, where is it? When are these Bush tax rates going to kick in and we're going to start adding millions of jobs every month? It isn't going to happen. It's another game being played by the Republicans who just want to get rid of the president. They want to shut this down because they want to blame President Obama. And here are the Senate Democrats, instead of standing up and saying, no, President Obama doesn't have anything to do about this. This is our call in the Senate. We're the Democrats. We represent the people across the country, and this is exactly what we're going to do. I kind of feel like this is the public option fight all over again, you know? They have the power to do it. They just have to have the guts to do it. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question, should Democrats explain their support of spending cuts? Text A for yes, text B for no to 622-639. And we'll get you the results later on in the show once you go to our new blog at ed.msnbc.com. There are two sides of this story. There's a number of different ways of looking at it. Joining us tonight is Washington Post columnist E.J. Dionne, who is also a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute. The title of E.J.'s column today is, Where's Obama's Resolve on the Budget Battle? Fair question. E.J., good to have you with us tonight.
Good to be with you, Ed.
Do you think the president can make a big difference in this right now? What do you think?
I think the president has a power to influence the debate that nobody else has. I mean, if you go back to the Clinton budget fight, it was really Bill Clinton who put the idea that he was fighting for Medicare, Medicaid, education, and the environment on the table. And I think President Obama so far has said this is a tiny part of the budget. I don't want to get caught in the muck of all this congressional wrangling. It's not going to do me any good. And maybe he's waiting. Maybe he's waiting for Paul Ryan's bigger budget next week for the next fiscal year, which is going to be, I think, pretty radical. And if that doesn't set off a fight, then nobody really stands for anything. I mean, we're not talking at all about the cuts in Head Start. We're not talking at all about the cuts in student loans or the programs for women, infants, and children. I mean, we're only talking about numbers. And if it's a fight about numbers, the Republicans are always going to win because everybody's going to say, well, they'll cut more than the Democrats.
Don't the Senate Democrats look a little weak right now that they just can't stand up and say we're not going down this road? We don't believe the American people want this. What do you think?
I hate to bring up that great old Will Rogers line again. I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Democrat, he said. And I don't think you can talk about a Senate majority because I think that majority in the Senate is split. I don't think they have the capacity to deliver a whole Senate majority behind a position that says we're not going to accept most of these cuts. And that's part of the problem here.
So do you think the $33 billion cuts that were talked about last night by the Democrats and Vice President Biden, you think that's a real number? And if it is, do you think John Boehner can convince the Tea Party Republicans in the House to take the deal?
To be perfectly honest, I hope it's not a real number, because if it is a real number in the sense of really cutting back programs, you're going to have to cut some stuff we really need. And think about that $33 billion. That is what John Boehner and Paul Ryan, the budget chairman, wanted. And then the Tea Party revolted and they said, we want more. Well, guess what? Their revolt worked, because by starting way out there at $60 billion, they've now got what they wanted originally. I got to see that as a Republican victory.
I mean, where are the Tea Party rallies across the country? We have seen rallies in the thousands of working families come out. Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan. I mean, Indiana, their House was out for a while. They went on a hiatus and said, we're not going to take this stuff against collective bargaining. I mean, it seems to me that the Democrats have the people on their side, but they're just afraid to make the move.
I think there really has been a shift in mobilization, that the conservatives and the Tea Party were really, really mobilized by the health care fight and by the election of Barack Obama. I think they have receded, and that activism you're seeing in the Midwest is a progressive activism we haven't seen since the 2008 election.
Yeah.
But no one's fighting this budget fight in a way that says, look, we're talking about big income transfers in our country, big growth and inequality. That's what those battles are about in Wisconsin and Ohio, and no one's trying to translate that to the Washington fight.
E.J. Dionne, always a pleasure. Great to have you with us tonight. Thank you.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Remember,